the most surprising to me is how they're doing this in like broad daylight, right? The media, Joe Biden, his campaign, the social media companies, broad daylight.
We each have our own gift to give, and yours is unique. Welcome to the Calvin Corelli Show. I'm really excited to have you.
Hey, Calvin.
Dmitri, my man, how's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
I'm great, man. I'm great. Ready for to just shoot the shit about whatever's going on in the world?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
All right. Killer. Super cool. Well, yeah, what have you been noticing since the last time we spoke?
Well, I haven't seen a change. I've seen an acceleration of what was already happening.
What do you say more?
Well, I've seen an acceleration in the push against socialism, let's say, even from people on the left. I've seen people speak out and actually talk about that you know what, maybe this isn't the right choice for us this time. And I'm just seeing an acceleration of that same old stuff.
Got it. Yeah. Have you been following the Hunter laptop story?
Yes, of course.
Yes. Well, a lot of people haven't. I spoke with Doug the other day, and he was like, well, it's all, I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm like, he's basically just ignoring the whole thing. And like, at the moment that he heard that, he didn't even realize that Rudy Giuliani and Steve Bannon was involved. As soon as he heard those names, he was like, I'm not even going to worry about that, which to me is bonkers. But it's, you know, is that media landscape, right? Where you, if you're, the system is set up so that if you're like, well, I only trust it if it comes from one of the quote unquote reputable sources, right? Well, then yeah, they're not going to cover this.
Yeah, I've definitely been following it. It's been interesting to see it get banned on Twitter, and then all the congressional actions that came after that. Whether you like them or not, Ted Cruz really is seeming to be taking a stand for free speech and calling these companies out and their CEOs. And I saw clips of the testimony yesterday, I believe, and it seemed like they were legitimately concerned about the actions that they were taking.
Wait, who was concerned about the action that who were taking?
Congress is very, well, at least the Republicans in Congress are very concerned about the actions that the social media platforms are taking, and they're actually taking action with Ted Cruz leading the way. And I don't think the social media companies expected that. And the way they reacted, they said, oh, it was a mistake, or oh, like we're going to change something. And he's making a big difference. Ted Cruz is making a big difference.
Yeah. I hope something happens here, because I didn't watch the whole thing. I tuned into the live stream on and off and saw some things, and like, you know, jumped a little back and forth. I didn't have time to watch the whole thing, but yeah, neither of the, like, especially Jack Dorsey and Sunday Pichai did not come off as credible at all to me. Zuckerberg was just his usual self, more or less, like, you know, humanoid, not super credible. Did you see that he was implicated in some of the emails from Hunter?
That who was?
Zuckerberg.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, he didn't write himself, but he was mentioned as they were talking to him about investing in something or other. So it's a pretty weak tie, but still, you know, wouldn't be surprising, right? Like my imagination is that Joe Biden has been playing this game for 47 years, right? He's so good at plausible deniability and at making sure that he's implicating anyone that he needs to implicate in this to protect himself.
For sure. It's actually kind of sad to see how good he is at lying and how he'll say it with a straight face and a finger pointed right at you that this is not true. And he has that built in. It's just a muscle memory thing. And we're, wow.
Yes. 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 There's like no sense of shame or remorse or like wrong. It's insane, right? Because
Yes.
you know it's not true. And like he doesn't even say, he just says this has been discredited. It's a Russian disinformation. He doesn't say these emails are fabricated. It didn't happen. Like he doesn't say any of that
Right.
stuff, right?
Right.
He's very careful with his language.
He doesn't deny that it's Hunter's laptop or that the emails are fake or real. It's just, this isn't true.
Right.
Like,
and don't
question.
Exactly. And that, like, don't look at me, look at what this other guy is doing. Cause he knows the game, right? Which is why he's hiding, he's hiding all the time and calling a lid all the time, right? He knows that the more he can stay out of the limelight and just let Trump say stupid shit and do his tweet thing, the better it is for his campaign, right? Because people don't want him.
Yeah, actually,
they're not excited about it.
I love the lid thing. It's oh, it's 9 a.m. and I'm calling a lid a week before the election. Okay, I see what you're doing. Or 5 days before the debate, he was completely gone.
Exactly, and it's so obvious, right? And yet, like there are smart people out there that don't realize it, that don't recognize it, that don't see. I think that's the one thing that has been the most surprising to me is how they're doing this in like broad daylight, right? The media, Joe Biden, his campaign, the social media companies, broad daylight. And this like, and they are more or less getting away with it. So one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is like, this obviously doesn't end with this election, right? There's so many people like you and like me and so many other people out there that have had their eyes open to how this game is really played, and they're not going to shut up. And they're like, once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? So there's no way to put the genie back in the bottle. So even if Trump were to win, like look out for a Richard Grenell down the line, or Jack Posobiec. I don't know if he's someone who would run for office, but he's definitely someone who's understands the game very, very well, right? There's going to be other players down the line who's going to realize that this is a real movement of people who are like, no more of this corrupt bullshit.
And I believe that the previous election, 2016, was actually the more important one and the more consequential one long term. Not only did that one result in 3 Supreme Court justices, but just the whole introduction of President Trump has changed so many people. He alone is just, he's not per se a Republican, he's not a Democrat, but he's just this, he's an eye opener, so to speak. So you may not like everything he does, or you may like everything he does. Quite frankly, I'm not in a position to judge his tweets or actions or anything. You know, he's the accomplishments he's had has earned the right to play it how he wants to do it. And I'm okay and I'm comfortable with delegating that task to him. I don't need to sit here every day and decide whether or not what he's doing as president is correct, because I don't know. So
that's how it works, right? Yeah.
But the point is, I think he's going to change how conservatives treat elections and treat debate. It's just changed everything in 2016. So I'm already optimistic, regardless of what happens in this election. There's too many of us, like you said, now for this to go away.
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine, like, I mean, if he hadn't run, right, it would just have been like Jeb. It was probably Jeb's turn, right? Yes. So he would have been president, and like that, it was just like, you know, they were just playing ping pong, right? They were all, you know, in on it together. They were all part of the same deal. And then they were like, pull it a little bit in this direction and pull it a little bit in that direction. I had a friend who explained it to me as like, well, if you look at the two axes of fiscal and social, I don't think it's a perfect model, but the idea basically being like, you know, that Republicans are a little more strict on the fiscal side and a little more loose on, you know, the Democrats a little more loose on the fiscal side. And the Democrats are more open socially, like, you know, and Republicans are a little more strict there. I don't know how that works out, but like
Yes.
his point was, regardless of who's in charge, it just means more government in this direction or more government in that direction, right? Like, I don't think it was financial and social. It was something else. I forget. But like, regardless, it's just like, well, one party moves the needle a little bit on this axis, the other moves it on that axis, but it never ever moves in the opposite direction where there's less government and more power to the people.
Yeah, and there, in this administration, there are signs kind of in both directions. We've obviously printed a lot of money, and you can make an argument that if we didn't, then things would be worse. But also on the other end, Trump seems to be a federalist. He's letting states take care of their own business.
Totally.
And if their business seems to be struggling, then that's your problem and figuring out a way to get out of it. And
yes.
So he is one, and by the way, he has this, I believe this rule he enacted as soon as he got into the presidency is for every new government group created, we need to cut two. Like he understands that there's a lot of clogged arteries in the government, and he's working to cut them. And that's a big deal. The criticism of him is that he is both, at the same time, there's criticism for him being a dictator and not doing enough for as a federal government. It doesn't make any sense.
No. Yeah, the whole totalitarian dictator thing, I don't get, like, I just don't see his actions bear that out at all. I don't get that. No, yeah, I would love to see the government reduced by 90%, right? Just decimate, cut it back to 10% of what it is. Give the money back to the people, let people handle it. There's something that was news to me because in Denmark, everything is so regulated and it's the government handling everything, right? And it's like, Denmark is at that point where, it's only something like 25% of the work of the population that's actually working in the private sector, and they pay for everybody else. The government is more than 50% of the population. And so are they going to vote for less government? Of course not, right? They would lose their job. So it's that tipping point where it gets really hard to take it, to move it back into democracy. But one of the things that has been surprising to me is how many, especially Christian communities I've seen where the church organizes, they do counseling for people in trouble. They help them out economically, financially, if there's like health or unemployment or other things, like where like people are just taking these things into their own hands, which I think is the right way to solve these problems, right? The government is a terrible mechanism to solve these kinds of problems, right? There's so much waste, there's no accountability, there's no incentive for the people administering it to be mindful of the money and making sure that it's efficient. And, spoke to my hairdresser last time I got my hair cut. Her mom has made it a profession to just, live off of the government teat, right? Like, that's all she's done for as long as my hairdresser can remember, right? Yes. That just shouldn't be possible. Like, she's a perfectly capable human being that's just been like, well, it's easier. If you just stay on the phone long enough, they're going to give you money. That was literally what she said, right? You stay on the phone long enough, they're going to give you money. Yeah,
they do crush all incentive to make a life for yourself. They crush that. Right. You're better off getting the government benefits that are originally intended for people that are down on their luck or down on their health, or whatever the case may be. But it just happens to be that you're going to make the same or more even than working an entry-level job. So why would you? Other than the reason that you're going to get work experience, and over time you're going to start raising your wages. That's a long way. Like, that's 5 years or 10 years from now. Well, I can get free money. Right. Why wouldn't I do that? And it's a logical question. You can't even blame the people for doing it, but the policy, which, and by the way, every policy in this group is very similar, where technically the intent is to help but more often than not, it actually hurts the ones it's intending to help more than anybody else. Same with
There's
minimum wage and free
right.
college and things like that.
Yeah. The it's so interesting because like I was reading the book called what is it called? Charles Murray is I forget what it's called, but it's about he studies the social welfare state from 1950 to 1980 or something like that, like pretty deep study. One of the stories he tells, and the conclusion is it doesn't work, right? The more money we put into welfare, the worse off everybody is, and the more expensive it is. It doesn't improve any meaningful parameter for people. And by the way, like this whole notion that quality of life equals the amount of money that you make, like we all know that's bullshit, right? But that's the mindset always. Like, well, how much money do you have? Well, if you have money, then you're fine, right? No, you're not, right? Just look at super rich people that are unhappy. But that's another story. But he has a specific thought experiment in there. Like imagine that you wanted to help people off of smoking, right? And so you created some kind of incentive for them to quit smoking. Well, you would have to have some cutoff point that says, well, only if you smoke more than 10 cigarettes a day do you get this incentive, right? Well, now you've just created an incentive for people who are smoking below that to smoke more so that they qualify for the incentive, right? So it's impossible to create these incentives without creating distortions. You just can't.
Right. And as far as the money thing, one of my favorite people to listen to is Naval, and he's always got he's both on the building wealth side and the spirituality and happiness side. And he says, money's great, but all it does is take care of your money problems. And it's like all your other problems for me. Okay, but money problems are important. So, yeah, I mean, you're right on the incentive side. You're actually encouraging people to do worse than they were already doing.
So that they qualify.
And there's a tipping point, okay, right? So even in any program like that, like these government programs, there's expected to be some fraud and some people who are gonna maybe do less work or they're gonna report whatever. That's expected, but there is a flipping point where after a certain amount of percentage of people who are taking advantage of the system, it's just a waterfall down. And we've probably hit that, or maybe we're close to it. So it's definitely a dangerous time in that regard.
Yeah, you mean tipping point in terms like for society, kind of like what I was saying with Denmark, where like at this now you just can't take it back because too many people are benefiting from it? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly like that. And probably more and more people are going to start leaving work and adding themselves to the government payroll, so to speak.
Well, and COVID hasn't freaking helped, right?
Right.
And then people get this idea. I've seen people have this like, well, if we can just print money, let's just print money and give it to everybody. Like people don't understand. Well, yeah, no, that's not actually sustainable, right?
And we're lucky here in the United States to be the reserve currency. Based on our actions, no other country would have survived this without hyperinflation. And we've figured out that we can print and raise our standard of living at the expense of all the foreigners holding our currency. And I believe I read that 70% of the total US current money is held by foreigners. So we're actually taxing those 70% of people for
how much of that is Chinese?
Probably a pretty good portion of it. I don't know how much. I know that they're our biggest carriers of debt, but we also hold Chinese debt. I actually looked into this one time. Like, how do we have so much debt? But other countries also owe us, and that doesn't go into it. It's a very confusing thing. And it's like everybody owes everybody in the world. Everybody, it seems like all countries are broke, all countries owe. And like it's kind of this pyramid scheme doesn't even make sense.
Right. Have you read the creature from Jekyll Island?
I haven't.
Have we talked about it? Have you heard of it?
I haven't. I don't think so.
So the creature, so Jekyll Island is an island off the coast of I forget, Georgia or something like that, down the East Coast, and it was where the Fed was created, and so the Fed
Oh,
is the creature from Jekyll Island, and it was
that's right.
created by I forget, like J.P. Morgan and like a
Yes.
bunch of like bankers, and this whole setup where the Fed is private, it's privately owned, it's arms like the whole it's a fascinating story, and I don't know what to believe about it, but he basically traces every single major war: First World War, Second World War, America's involvement in Second World War, the Russian Revolution, all of that traces it back to monetary, to banks, to central banks, and financing. And so it's like, um, that is why those wars happened, was over money. He even actually says that the Civil War wasn't actually about slavery. That was the pretext,
Mhm.
but it was about control of the money supply. Like the southern states wanted to break out of the northern of the U.S. money central bank,
Mm.
and that's what was the real reason that this happened. I think JFK too, right? Like, he was like, that was CIA. I forget, it was like gold standard or other stuff. Like, when did we go off the gold standard?
1971.
71. And who was that? Was that Lyndon?
Nixon.
Nixon. Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of interesting potential, um, hidden stories in banking, and with the gold standard, like that changed everything. And who decides that and why?
Mhm.
Who knows?
Is that a good idea? Yeah.
Who knows? Well, since the gold standard, asset prices have been going crazy, while income, especially middle class income, has remained pretty flat, and that's caused a lot of inequality, and and obviously inequality leads to social unrest, and that's what we're getting now. That's what we got in the 70s. I mean, that's what we get always. Too
Right.
much inequality is bad for the country. And one thing about at least economic inequality, it's not a product of racism or somebody's intent per se, because it's just a natural way of life. It's a natural way of nature that the resources over time accumulate to the few, because they're the most efficient. They're the most they have the best strategy. It's just a natural way of things, and it's not just with resources. It's even with, well, it is with resources, not just with money. It's like trees, for example, the ones at the very top get all the sunlight,
Sure.
and the little baby ones below it, they can't get anything. That's just so. It's just a natural way of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the points too is like it's not static, right? I mean, Jeff Bezos didn't grow up rich, right? And like, his kids, surely are going to inherit stuff, but they might not be. They might suck in business, right? They might be terrible business people, and so it's definitely happened before that. That the next generation just squanders the money, and also like we were talking about before, how this notion that somehow quality of life is measured in money, right? More money very easily becomes an enabler of terrible behavior. I heard a friend of a friend was like, had an exit event and made a ton of money, and immediately started like, doing cocaine and hookers, and, getting a divorce from his wife and his two kids. And like in a year or two, he was just in a terrible place, right? Just his life completely ruined by this money. I have cousins who inherited like real money, like, tens of millions. Their four siblings, one is doing phenomenal. Like the one is fine. The others are not happy. It's just not like, it's really, money can do serious damage to you if you're not prepared for it. And if you're not, emotionally ready for it. And I think to a large extent, if you didn't earn it, there's just something where it makes you feel unworthy, or like guilty, right? Like you didn't earn this, and you haven't found a path to really earn. And I think that exchange of value with other humans is so important for our feeling of self-worth and just feeling of meaning in life.
Yeah, there's no question that money is dangerous in the hands of people who aren't prepared to have it. You need to. The worst thing that you could possibly do in your life is if you're let's say not rich, if you know a normal job and you're living maybe paycheck to paycheck, anything. The worst thing that can happen to you is winning the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
90 is some ridiculously crazy number that 90% of lottery winners, like major lottery winners,
Mm-hmm.
end up either broke, in jail, or dead, or divorced, or all the above.
Right.
I mean, it's just the worst possible thing that can happen to you. And that's crazy. Like $100 million is the worst thing that can possibly happen to you. But you're right. If you have bad habits, you don't know how to spend money, maybe you already have a slight drug problem, but now all of a sudden you can afford any kind of drugs in any quantity that you want, your life's going to spiral out of control quickly.
Right. All your friendships, all of a sudden dynamic changes, right? I visited my uncle some years ago. He's passed now, but he was like very, very wealthy. And I went to visit him because I was like, I want to learn from you what you've done in business. I want to just, can we sit down for a couple hours? I just want to grill you. I just want to learn as much as I possibly can from you because you've done amazing. And he said yes, and we did it. And then as he was driving me back to the train station to go back home, he was like, I was sure that you came to ask me for money, right? That was just like, it's just changes the dynamic of relationships because, yeah, so many people want something from you, right? They want your money. They just, it changes how other people see you and relate to you.
Yeah, and that's pretty unfortunate, and it shows a lack of confidence in oneself that, like you did, maybe you thought that his information and his experience is going to be more valuable than money. I mean, it's like the fish and the fisherman question. Would you rather have a fish or learn how to fish? This guy knows how to fish. I'm going to learn how to fish from him. I don't want his fish. That's just going to last a day, you know? So I think that's a lack of confidence and thinking I can do that too. But rather it's, let me just quickly get as much as I can. If I'm sacrificing my relationship, so be it, it's worth it. But is it worth it? Probably not.
No, but at least you learn, right?
Yeah, and back to your first point, by the way, as far as what you said about Jeff Bezos, he didn't grow up rich and maybe his kids are going to blow it all. I believe 90% of millionaires are, this is what it was. The 1%, like the top 1%, is always changing. Like the way we're trained to picture the 1% is just there are these fat banker guys who are always just there, and they're not letting anybody else get in there. They're pushing them down and keeping them down. But that's not the case. Most people, most 1% people, they're either there 1 year or 90%. The point of the story is 90% of them are self-made. And usually they're not there for very long. They'll fall back and let other people, so like they made their money maybe 1 year or 5 years, and then they're down. Right. And it's a constant.
Exactly. Yeah, we talk about the top 1% as if they're a static group, but they're not. Yes. It's constantly changing, constantly moving, which is what you want, right? There's always going to be a top 1%, right? We just want to make sure that there's some mobility in there. I mean, and they all, like the hearing yesterday, like Zuck wasn't a billionaire, like, when he, as a kid. Jack Dorsey wasn't. Evan Williams, the other, like the founder of Twitter, wasn't, right? Sunday, I don't think so either. Like Larry and Sergey, no. I mean, they didn't grow up poor. Bill Gates didn't grow up poor, but they created their own fortune, right? That's how it should be. And they should totally be, able to do that and allowed to do that. We want people to be able to do that, right? We just want more people to be able to create success for themselves, whether they have their own business or they work for someone else and create value together as a team.
Yeah, and I think that those two ideas that we just talked about between the confidence of just taking the information and running with it, and knowing that it's possible and that the top 1% is attainable. A lot of people get there, at least for 1 year. And just
how much does it take to get into the 1%?
Well, if we're taking all people, I think it's
US.
They usually organize it by age bracket.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what it is, but probably around, I would guess, $500,000 per year of income. But to finish that thought, is if you combine the confidence of knowing that if you're equipped with the right information and knowing the fact that it's a constant rotation of people in the 1%, it's doable. And that's inspirational. You actually, hey, I'm going to give this a shot. When people don't have the confidence and they think there's no way I could get to the 1%, okay, or even the top 10%, whatever the case may be, then we're back into that just living off the government thing. It's like, why even try if you don't have the confidence?
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, and like often the smartest people are not the ones that make it to the top 1%, right? Like highly educated, super smart, tend to get in their own way, right? Instead of like the street smart, like, hey, just, what works here, like relationships and just delivering value, serving people, right? Showing up. I saw Joe DeSana talk and spoke with him. He grew up. Have you heard of Joe DeSana?
No.
Spartan Race. He does these what was he before? I think he was a banker, and then he starts to do these like massive hardcore races. And so he's all about grit, all about the grit, just put in the work. So he walks around with a 40-pound kettlebell just all the time, just to add a little more weight to what he said. When he flies, he brings that with him in the plane. And then like, as soon as he gets out the plane, he finds some stairs and runs up and down the stairs with his 40-pound kettlebell. He's that kind of guy. When he was a kid, he told a story of how he grew up in a mafia environment in Queens, and he got to clean the pool for the mafia boss. And he just showed up every day, not just on time, but 15 minutes before the appointed time. And he always did his job, diligently. And this mafia boss taught him this stuff. He's like, dude, like just, on time is too late. Show up 15 minutes before, do the thing. Just if you're reliable and dependable, like I'm going to introduce you to all my friends. And he got this, he didn't get into the mafia, right? But he got the work and the job. It's not complicated, folks, right? It's really not. But if you come at it with an attitude of like, oh, like, I'm entitled and I don't know if I want to do this really. And like, I look at the valet. And I live in a doorman building. I lived in a doorman building before. We have this valet service that receives the packages, right? And then you come and pick them up there. A lot of the time during the day, these people have nothing to do, right? Because there's no packages coming in, and there's no tenants coming to pick up the packages. If you're not sitting there educating yourself, studying, like business or something that's gonna enhance you, if you just sit there doing Snapchat and Netflix, it's not my fault that you're broke, right? It's not my fault that you're not advancing in your career. Like there's ample opportunity. Any kind of job that you have where there's downtime, you're in a store, retail environment, something like that. We have a swimming pool down here. There's pool boys, not right now because COVID, but normally there'll be like lifeguard on duty. I don't know why they do that, but they're scared that you're going to drown. But anyway, that's that whole like, you're on your own, figure it out. If you try and drown, it's your freaking problem. It's not our problem. It's just a pool. Okay. But anyway, so there's a lifeguard down there. Most of the day they have nothing to do. Like go educate yourself, right? Like if you want something, if you don't want something, that's fine, but then it's not on me to pay for you. Right.
Yeah, the education today is so much easier to get than it's ever has
So
been.
much easier. Yeah.
But between books and podcasts and YouTube, you don't need anything else. You don't need college. You don't need a degree. You really don't need, and it's at your fingertips. Like you said, you can do it on the job. You can stick a
Right.
headphone in instead of watching Netflix. You
Right.
watch something useful.
And the fact that we're not like that, we haven't seen a dramatic increase in the overall qualification level of the population in the past 10 years says a lot about that personal drive to learn and grow.
Yeah, and I think that we actually have seen it. It's just internationally.
Right.
People in India, I mean, these people are driven. They're educating themselves. They're learning new skills. They're taking over IT completely, and for good reason. They're good at it, and they're willing to pay their dues early on to make it.
Right.
And they don't have.
And I guess it just increases that gap, right? Between rich and poor, or successful, unsuccessful, because like the people who want success, and I guess like they're gonna study that stuff, and he's not gonna be a pool boy for long, right? He's gonna run the team, and then he's gonna like run the next thing, and then he's gonna be off to starting his own company or something, right? Like whereas the guy who's like, yeah, I'm just gonna sit here, watch a next Netflix show, clock my time, and then hang out with my friends on the weekend, that person's just not going to advance. And so that gap just gets bigger and bigger.
Well, you're right. It's a completely different mentality. The person that's working their way up, and this is just a stop on the way, and maybe they're making minimum wage, but they're not going to be there forever. And then the other side is, well, I'm working. Let's say it's that job. Let's say it's a pool boy, which is not maybe a very difficult job, but I work full time, and for that reason, I deserve to be paid a quote unquote living wage for the rest of my life, whether or not I advance or not. Like, I'm a person and I'm working, and
right.
That's just not that's a completely different mentality, and
you don't deserve anything. Like, nobody owes you anything. Like, you're entitled to whatever rate you can get for your work, right? Like the market wages, that's what you're entitled to. You're not entitled to a minimum wage or anything like that. If you are worth that to employers, they're going to pay you, right? They're going to pay you competitive. It depends on what the supply is, obviously, right? But if in a competitive market, you will make what you're worth. And then, and the beautiful thing about it is you just go increase your worth, and you'll make more.
Yeah, and kind of to tie this back into politics a little bit, I think many of the politicians that are pushing these policies and it's not just pushing the policies, it's pushing the ideas and getting them into people's heads of what you are and aren't entitled to. And when a person, an individual begins to believe that they are entitled to a high-paying job, and they're entitled to health care, and they're entitled to a big house. I mean, you're actually tearing, this is not an exaggeration, it's kind of a cliche, but I do believe you're tearing the fabric of society a little bit, because it's not the way things work in the natural world. The more you can stick to natural things, the easier it's going to be. Natural things is the people who are contributing are going to get more. And when you fight that, it's like a lie. When you lie to somebody, that is tearing not just your relationship, but yourself. So you kind of forget where you are, and it's just not a good thing to do. And this is the same thing. It's a lie.
Exactly. And it stokes envy and jealousy, right? Which then makes people focus on all the wrong things, not the things that actually make them, more successful or earn these things, but on tearing down the other people. So it inevitably leads to socialism, right? Like, we need to take from the rich and give to the poor, but then socialism inevitably leads to someone needs to be the arbiter that needs to decide this stuff, right? And now you have everything is politicized, and then we have like Joe Biden, right?
Right. That's the dirty trick about the dirty little trick about socialism is that it's not just money funneling from the rich to the poor. There are these middlemen that are taking quite a bit for their services of distributing that money.
Right. And they take bribes, right? I mean, that is, I mean, the reason Joe Biden is so rich is because he has had the opportunity to influence the budget of the United States, which is a lot of freaking money. And so he can earn a little bit on the side for like, nudging it in one direction or the other, right? There's always going to be that incentive. There's always going to be that. And the more control the more the government controls, the more that incentive is going to be there.
Absolutely. And it seems like that incentive's been around for quite a long time. And you see the huge book deals, the huge speaking fees that former presidents get. And you kind of got to scratch your head. Those deals that they're getting, for example, the Obama book deal, I believe Barack and Michelle got $40 million to write 2 books. That's a lot of money for books, and they got it up front. And it just makes you question where's this coming from, but it's speaking fees too. When whether it's Bush or Clinton or whoever it is, and they're getting $300,000 or $500,000 for a 45-minute speech, questions are asked.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And
so how does that work when they're out of office? Is this payback for things that they did while they were in office? Is it that they still have so much clout with the Democrat Party that they can pull some strings, or the Republican Party?
I believe that is payback for what they were able to do for banks or for other countries or whatever the case may be.
And the reason the banks want to pay that is because then like the next guy is going to talk. Like if they didn't pay up, then
don't worry with them. They don't end up paying.
Exactly. Their reputation would be tarnished, and then their influence peddling in the government would end.
Yes. And it's a shame. I think the individual contribution limit to a campaign is small. I don't remember if it's 1,700 or 4,700, whatever the case is. It's significantly less than what a corporation can pay down the road. I suppose an individual can do it too, but it's definitely a funky situation. I don't know exactly what's going on, but it's just the last 4 years have really taught me, be wary of things that make you uncomfortable and things that kind of don't feel right. Just look into it.
Yeah, I think it's something that I think is hard to legislate on, because I mean, obviously corruption is illegal, and yet it happens, or then it's kind of like hitting. There's a thing that stuck me when I lived in India, which was everybody, or like the vast majority of people, would drive with their high beam on all the time at night. Right? So you're constantly being blinded by other motorists. And so what are you going to do, right? Are you going to drive with your low beam, or are you going to drive with your high beam on? Because like you're blinded. And so like your best chance of actually seeing and driving safely is to also drive with your high beam on, right? And so there's that cultural tipping point. There's something similar that happened in Greece during that like breakdown. I forget when it was, 10 years ago, whatever, where it was like the people just stopped paying taxes, and the government couldn't really do anything about it, because if they jailed all these people, it was on such a massive scale. It's like then there would be out of doctors, and there would be no one to work there. Plus, like the people who worked for the tax system, there's someone who worked there for their IRS who was actually trying to clamp down on that stuff, and he was immediately kicked out or demoted or put into some other position because it's like maybe there's some kickbacks for like looking the other way if someone's not paying the taxes. And so culturally, it's very easy to get to a point where it's very hard to return. Right? It's very hard to reverse that high beam thing, or like I feel like we've come to a place with corruption in government, where it's like, yeah, it's kind of expect that, right? Which is a very dangerous thing, because where the fuck does that end? Is like, well, both sides do it kind of thing, right?
Well, I think back to the natural way of things, that's just the natural way of the government. And it's going to be corrupt. And in some cultures, it'll be more corrupt than in other places. But even in the best culture, it's going to be corrupt. That's just the natural way of things. And I think you mentioned this at the beginning, is how do we get the government smaller and responsible for less? How do we get the communities and individuals responsible for more? That's the question.
Yeah, I think that's the best approach for sure. I also think that there's room for someone to lead the country in a cultural change of just like, hey guys, this is not acceptable, like zero tolerance for this stuff. Like, you've seen doping in cycling and other sports, right? Where there's consensus, like zero tolerance. Yeah, there's some things happening, but even Lance Armstrong got caught in the end, right? Because he got too cocky. And for me, doping in sports, I don't actually really have a problem with that. I think like Lance Armstrong won fair and square by doing what everybody else was doing. He just did it better, right? But in sports, we have this like, no, zero tolerance, that's cheating, is cheating. But in politics, we're like, politicians be politicians, right? They're like, they're going to be grifters.
Yeah, I think what really did Lance in is that he was so adamant that he didn't cheat. And I guess people want the people who they catch cheating to admit that they're cheating. But if they cheat and then admit to it, that's cool. It's all right. Okay. But if you lie and you point your finger and you do the interviews, they just can't get over that.
No, I mean, he had some, it seems like he has some personal issues around like anger and defensiveness and that kind of thing. And like, I think if he hadn't run again, if he hadn't, gone for another round, he would probably have been fine, but
yeah, it's too bad, because he went from being on top of the world to being a pariah completely. And that I'm sure is a mentally difficult thing, but sometimes you reap what you sow.
Yeah. Culturally, is that, so you're saying culture, like we're okay. Well, we'll forgive you if you admit it, right? But you're not going to get your title back, and you're not going to get to keep writing and doing it, right?
Well, in America, at least, even that, do you remember there's an anchor for NBC who Brian Williams? He was suspended because it was found that he lied about being in a helicopter that was under fire in some other country, completely made the story up. And after he admitted to it, he ended up getting work again. I don't remember. He might have even had primetime spots after that for a period of time. So this culture that we have is very, very forgiving, very forgiving. Obviously, you like Michael Vick with the dog fighting. That was very bad. People hated him, but he came back. He apologized. He admitted that it was wrong, and he became a superstar again.
I don't know who that is.
Michael Vick is a former NFL quarterback. He was, I believe, he was MVP of the league, and just a superstar. People loved him. He's the fastest quarterback, and it was fun to watch. He was on the cover of all the video games, and then all of a sudden, one day, he got arrested for dog fighting. And you know how America loves their dogs, and dogfighting is a brutal sport where their dogs are literally tearing each other apart. And he went to jail for that. For a few years, he was looked down upon quite significantly. But he came out. He got out of jail. He apologized. He went through the whole process of doing all that stuff, and he got back on top of the world again.
Got it.
So
Yeah.
and this culture
Yeah.
is very forgiving, and it is very unique. I mean, we'll tolerate certain things, but we won't. So like we won't tolerate bribing a police officer, right? Like nobody does that. But in other countries, in Russia or India, or Greece, probably for, I don't know about Greece, but I know Russia and India for sure. If you get pulled over, it's standard. It's expected that you're gonna give them some money to go away. That's just what you do. You know, like in
Right.
America, you get your license and registration ready.
Right.
In Russia, you get your bribe ready.
Right. Yeah.
So it's definitely different by culture.
Yeah. What do you make of changing the topic here? What do you make of all the rich people that made money? So why is it so? Here's what I'm thinking is like if you're earned your money, by the book, by being smart and working hard and educating yourself and like just thinking about your talents and abilities and developing them and doing good work and serving other people, and you get rich, right? You would think that the natural response is like, hey, the shit works. I'm not gonna belittle you or like pretend like you're a victim here. I'll show you exactly what I did, and I'll help you do the same, and you will feel proud about what you've done. You'll feel confident and comfortable in your own skin about it. And yet what we see so many rich people who feel guilty about their wealth. And then they want to like, oh yeah, I did this, and like I was special, it was privilege. It's because I'm white. It's because like whatever, and so you don't have the same opportunity, so therefore socialism or something like that. What do you make of that?
I think most of those people never actually went out into even, okay, we'll put it this way. I think most of those people live in their bubble, okay? And everybody that they know is as rich or approximately as rich as they are, and everyone around them is comfortable. And they rarely see people who are uncomfortable. And then it just becomes a group thing, like, hey, we're all good people hey, like we kind of feel bad and we want other people to feel good, and it's just a fun thing for them to think about. I don't actually think that they don't, it's not like they want to give up half their wealth to somebody else to walk up to an individual and write them a check. They just want to talk about it.
Yeah, they want to do something to assuage their guilt, right? But why is it they feel guilty? Is because they know that they cheated, that these people actually did cheat somehow? Or is it just because it makes them uncomfortable? Kind of like when someone is begging for money, it just on a human level makes you uncomfortable, right? The difference.
Yes, so that does make them uncomfortable, but the reason they're uncomfortable maybe in their skin or in the position that they are in is many of them maybe didn't earn it.
Right.
The people, I think, who did start from the bottom and worked and didn't go party on the weekends, and those people probably don't feel bad. Maybe they want to help. Hey, I'm going to help and I'll donate money, but I don't feel bad. I feel good. In fact, I feel good that I'm in an opportunity to help others. The people who feel bad maybe grew up that way, and maybe they, like back when what we were talking about of coming into a lot of money, they didn't earn it. They don't feel like they deserve it, and maybe they want to. I guess they actually feel bad about that.
It's actually come to think of it now. When I grew up, I remember in high school, we moved to a smaller town in Denmark, and we were well off. We were, one of the more well-off families in the city, in town. Like where I grew up first was in what's known as the whiskey belt north of Copenhagen, where all the rich people live. So that was more common. And yeah, because the rich people drink whiskey or something. I don't know. But then we moved to this other town, which was a small port town, 40,000 people. There'd been a shipyard and like, more industrial seafaring kind of town. And so people were not as well off in that area. And I actually felt a lot of guilt. And the reason I felt a lot of guilt was that they seemed to have better social bonds. There seemed to be more love, more connection, more intimacy, where my home felt cold, and sort of socially, emotionally stunted a little bit to me. And it was something, as a sensitive kid, it was something that I struggled with a lot. And so I think in retrospect, like I felt very guilty about being rich because, well, it wasn't the fact that I hadn't earned it and it wasn't mine or anything. It was just that I felt somehow that I associated our wealth with, and it wasn't like absurd wealth or anything. It was definitely like upper middle class or upper class or something. But I associated the wealth with that social, lack of intimacy or connection.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So I had a thing where I was like, I wouldn't, if you ask me like, are you rich? I'll be like, I don't want to be rich, right? Because that means I'm a bad person. I'm like, I don't, you can't relate to me, or I can't have relationships, or like something like that. Yeah. So
interesting. Yeah, and maybe part of it was just wanting to fit in with whoever you were with at the time. If
Sure.
Back in the rich neighborhood, if somebody asked if you were rich, like, yeah, like everybody else, we're like everybody else. And then in this one, it's you want to be like everybody else.
No, definitely, absolutely. That was definitely part of it. But it was also like the when I moved there, the people felt just like a couple of years more mature on an emotional level in general, all the kids in general, than the environment I grew up in. It was much more welcoming. Like it was a very tough environment where I grew up. It was like very adversarial and competitive, and kids were not very nice. And then I came to this other place and I was like welcomed with open arms and immediately like made to feel part of the group and welcome. Is like, that could also be like this Copenhagen guy comes over, right? That was like a little bit exciting for these people. So, it could be many things in it, but yeah, it's definitely very, very different culture in those two places.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it makes you wonder, yeah, exactly what is going on. Why are people feeling bad about where they are? But the question, you can take it a little bit further. Why aren't they doing something on an individual level if they feel bad? Why aren't they using their resources and connections as an individual to help another individual, the ones that they say are, let's say, underprivileged? Instead of doing that, why are they pushing for systematic nationwide change? Like, whoa.
Right. Well, to be fair, like a lot of people might be doing that and just not, talking about it, right? But and also there are people who are definitely doing the other thing, and it's like, yeah. And I think it's just, it's virtue signaling, right? It's, you want to be seen as doing something good, and you get brownie points for it, and then you can, again, the same social circles, they can all pat each other in the back and say, oh, how good people we are.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, black people are getting killed in the streets and the looting and the rioting, right?
That's exactly right. So it comes down to, how do I look in front of my peers? If I look virtuous, then that's what matters. It doesn't matter ultimately what happens to the people that we're talking about as far as the underprivileged. As long as I put out my statement and it looks good.
Right.
And that's why I think that they're pushing for systematic change, because those decisions are made somewhere else, and they're going to affect other people. I'm not going to affect my life. My life is already great. And the more virtuous I look, the better I feel about myself.
Yeah.
And you're right, a lot of people are helping on an individual level, but it's rare to see that being broadcasted.
Right. Or yeah, even someone calling people out and being like, hey, stop this. Just if you feel so strongly about it, do something, right? Just contribute.
Yes.
You want to raise
yes.
the taxes, pay more in taxes. Voluntary contribution.
That's right. I think if somebody is actually wanting to pay more in taxes, they're better off taking that money and doing something at it personally, individually, starting a little nonprofit company that's going to help 4 people out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, 4 people have a better week. Mm-hmm. That's such a bigger difference than demanding that government do something. Like,
right.
Doesn't make sense.
What? Have you watched John Oliver?
Yes.
Did you follow him back from the Jon Stewart days?
Yes.
And then he got his HBO show.
Yes.
What happened to him? Was it him or was it us? Because like I used to love that guy and I was like, yay. And now I can't stand him.
I agree. He's probably still very talented and his writing is very good. I think there's no question that he changed quite a bit. His reporting became a lot more one-sided. He became, instead of making jokes across the board, it was only jokes directed at one side. You know, back in the day, during the Jon Stewart days, jokes for the Daily Show, jokes, you know, they'd make fun of Bush and they'd make fun of Obama and they made fun of everybody. Right. But when it's just one-sided, I mean, like, come on, it's not fun. It's not as fun. Even I'll give credit where credit's due. Saturday Night Live, I've seen the last couple of weeks clips, not the whole things, but they're actually taking jabs at Biden and they're taking jabs at Kamala, and obviously they're doing it on Trump, but they're spreading the wealth around, and I enjoy it. I like, yeah, that's funny on both sides.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't watched Saturday Night Live in a while because it was terrible for a long time.
It's kind of they did parody of the debates very well, in my opinion.
Nice, very cool. Yeah, I may have to look at that. Yeah, the thing that like I'm questioning about someone like John Oliver is like, why? Like, why is he so? How is he so certain of his opinions? And why those opinions? I think he's tackling some issues that are not so clear cut, but he's like just pushing one line very, very hard. Like Brexit, I think there's good arguments on either side, right? Mm-hmm. But he was firmly against Brexit, right? Trump, I think there are good arguments on either side, right? But he just hates everything about Trump, right? From I haven't seen in a while, but from what I've seen, it's like where is it? I mean, if you can't see the arguments on either side, on both sides of those issues, I don't like, you're not paying attention. Like you're clearly an activist, right? You're not actually an honest human being.
Oh yeah. Well, he's not a reporter. He's definitely an activist. And I think part of it is he realized that he had a lot more power. He had a lot of power with his show. Like he was able to actually change things pretty significally, and he decided, I think, to take advantage of that power.
And so my question is really like, and we can only speculate here, but like, what is going on inside of him, or what is the context, the environment around him that makes him so one-sided? Does he genuinely believe it? Is it that there's some financial corporate interest? Is it in order to appear a certain way to his posse or to his friends? Like what is it that makes someone as smart and he's not? He used to be funny, right? Someone who's capable of being as funny as him, and then turn that into this very one-sided activist kind of thing, leaving the humor behind, leaving everything that made him great behind. What's going on there? What do you think?
I think it's everything that you mentioned. It's the corporate interest. It's the crowd that he surrounds
He's the
himself
first
with.
to go against corporate interests. Like he like did this whole thing about the FTC trying to do a like what was it the what was the communications
Yeah, the internet thing.
what was it
I
called?
know.
And he called it he called it like internet fuck, like online fuckery act or something like that. He went very
Yeah.
hardcore against that, against his corporate interests, against Viacom, and took flack for it, right? So he hasn't been afraid to take up positions that hurt his corporate owners, right? But it might be his own friends, his own
Yeah, I don't
financial
know
interests.
I don't remember exactly that argument that he had and whether or not it actually helped or hurt the corporate interest. I believe the public perception of that bill was actually flipped. They believed that by passing it, it would help corporations and hurt individuals, but that wasn't really the case, in my opinion. So I think he was still protecting his corporate interest in that moment. What happened to him, I think what happens to many successful people who then, like you said, they drop what got them there and they become somebody else. And then what we loved about them and at the beginning is no longer there. I just think it was the snowball effect that we're getting. Here's what I think it was. Maybe he was always leaning left, but not too much. And then he was getting more and more good feedback on his leftist things, and he would do more of them and more of them and more of them. And then it turned out that's all he was doing.
Yeah.
But who knows? I mean, people
boiling frog effect.
People come and go all the time, and he's probably just going to be one of those the people that came and went.
Right. Yeah.
And he could have been great. He really could. He really had a lot of power with the show. A lot of people were watching it. I would be surprised if half as many people that used to watch it now. He had the power to change things quite a bit. Right. And I don't think he does anymore.
Yeah. So wrapping up, which way do you think the election is going to go?
Despite the fact that the polls are showing whatever they're showing and the betting markets are showing Biden is going to win, to me, every data point and every anecdotal reason I have leads me to believe Trump is going to win big. For me, I'm hearing between my friends and my family, acquaintances on Facebook, there's Democrats who are going to vote for Trump. But I'm yet to hear one person that I actually know that says, I voted for Trump in 2016, but I'm not going to in 2020. So it just doesn't make sense to me personally. I mean, he's got a huge support across the country. People are now even questioning Biden, and with this whole Ukraine thing and China thing, I just don't get it. What's going on with the betting markets? But I think it's a 90% chance that Trump's going.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there are things that could move. I have heard of people that said they voted Trump in 2016 and not doing it this year, right? Like, I think there's a lot of people that get sucked into like, Trump is divisive, Trump is like very negative, all that stuff, that don't realize that, well, the majority is that the media is very divisive, right? And that the Democrats are actually terribly divisive as well, right? So a lot of it's like, it's that pattern where the media or the Democrats will do something terrible and then the Republicans respond to it. And then everybody's like, the Republicans are like, or Trump is like terrible, right? That seems to be a pattern that happens over and over again. And I think a lot of people are falling for it. So I have seen that. I think turnout is a big factor as well, right? Like if they have really they've used Trump so much as that monster to scare everybody, right? Like, despite what his actual actions are, like they were like, we're all going to be in concentration camps at the end. Like, none of that has happened, right? Like, attacks on the free press. How many members of the press has Trump imprisoned? Like zero, right? Absolutely zero. But people buy the rhetoric and they're being fed the rhetoric. So, yeah, but the passion at his rallies, like the intensity, the energy at his rallies, unmistakable, right? Unparalleled.
Yeah, and that's because people see his accomplishments. He's getting peace deals signed in the Middle East, which was an unthinkable action for decades. Who would have ever thought that there'd be peace deals? And guess who's doing it? Trump is doing it.
Yes. He's ending wars and not starting new ones.
Yeah, but when Trump first took office, there was a big problem with North Korea launching missiles, and now they're
ISIS.
not. Yeah, ISIS was Syria, all these things. And by the way, he's the first one to not start a new war. Just peace deals all over the world, Africa, Middle East.
Right. But he's racist, Dmitri.
Right. He's racist, but he is changing with prison reform. He's giving more money to historically Black colleges.
Wages were up, unemployment was down for Blacks and Hispanics, and
he was universally considered good to the Black community before he became president by all the same people calling him racist now. And this is exactly back to our podcast from last time. These are the kinds of things, these inconsistencies that led me to make the switch. It doesn't make sense. You can't at the same time call him a totalitarian and call for him to do more and take more control for the federal government. You can't call him a racist one year and then 5 years ago he was the greatest thing ever. It just doesn't make sense. It's inconsistent and they're lies.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, and just, I mean, I think a lot of people are seeing what he's done, and this is the good thing about him. He's encouraged us all to maybe not believe everything right off the first. Like, oh, we heard this, we're gonna believe it. That's not happening anymore. Mm-hmm. That's not happening. Only the really partisan people are still just taking what they hear at face value. But that's changing. That's why I think he's going to win.
Yeah. All right. Let's see what happens. It's in 5 days or something. Well, we don't know. We don't know that we'll know the result on election day.
I believe we will know the result on the election day. The win is just going to be too big, and the extra couple days of mail-in ballots that are going to come in those states aren't going to matter. He's going to win by, in my opinion, he's going to win by a big margin. Obviously, at this point, I am pretty biased, and I can even, quite frankly, I can even feel myself like trying to stick up for him and not necessarily have to address every issue that comes to him. Just at this point, we're so close to the election. I've picked him as my side, and I am biased. That I admit to that at this point. But that's just, I guess that's my human nature.
Right. I got my hats ready here. Depending on who wins, I got a Biden-Harris hat. Just in case. I promised Doug. He didn't. Yeah. So Doug and I had a conversation. I don't know if you saw that conversation where we're like, oh, all right, so like whoever wins, if Biden wins, I'm gonna don the Biden-Harris hat. If Trump wins, he's gonna don a MAGA hat. So I went out and bought a Biden hat, and so I was ready. He didn't do the same. I mean, come on, man. He was like, yeah, I'll borrow one from a neighbor if I need to.
Oh, boo.
Commitment.
Yeah, and it's kind of unfair, you know, if Biden and Harris win, I don't believe we're going to see any riots, but if Trump wins, we're going to have some action. So that's not a fair thing. Let's be fair, guys. Let's wear the hat.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
Yeah. All right, my man. So good to see you again. Really
Great
appreciate
to see you
it.
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is so fun. All right, we got to hang out in person again soon.
Well, you're coming to War Room?
I am, yes. So we will be hanging out soon. That's right.
All right. I'll see you then.
What up, YouTube? Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, even if you freaking didn't, hit the subscribe button so you get more videos from me, and also hit the bell button so you get tick, 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 notified whenever there is a new video from me. Thank you very much. I'll catch you next time.